Hello, strangers. Today we will be discussing the absolutely brutal beating and tragic death of Matthew Shepard, a young man who fell prey to an absolutely senseless and horrific hate crime. This is an extremely difficult story to discuss, and there will be multiple trigger warnings throughout this episode. If you are not in a place to be able to listen to this kind of story, please protect your mental health and do not listen to this episode. If you're so inclined, we do encourage you to visit the Matthew Shepard Foundation website, which will be linked in the show notes, to learn more about Matt and what you can do to help prevent hate crimes. We love you and thank you. The term hate crime is defined as a crime committed on the motivation of bias. It is not strictly to do with dislike or anger, but more about the prejudice against a person or persons. Though unfortunately, it seems the two often go hand in hand. The FBI released the hate crimes data from the Uniform Crime Reporting Program for the year of 2024 in August of 2025. According to that data, 13,768 people were the victims of single bias hate crime incidents. Of those 13,000 plus, 17.2% were due to the person's sexual orientation. 3.9% were due to the person's gender identity. Currently, the LGBTQ plus panic defense is banned in the District of Columbia as well as 20 different states. In 30 other states, however, this defense is still allowed to be used in criminal trials. In 11 states, legislation was introduced to ban the so-called LGBTQ plus panic defense, but it failed. This defense allows bias and harmful stigmas surrounding the queer community to reduce the severity of a criminal sentence or to get out of a sentence altogether. Today, we're going to be discussing the young man at the center of one of these heinous crimes, Matthew Shepard. I'm Christiana.
And I'm Bree.
And this is a special episode of Something Strange. Welcome to episode 45, The Tragic Case of Matthew Shepard. So I'm going to say right at the top of this episode, we're going to give some trigger warnings. Strangers, this whole episode is a trigger warning. This is a really rough case. We felt it was really, really important to cover. So trigger warnings here: death by beating, discussion of severe injuries, discussion of sexual assault, discussions of hate crimes, hateful language, mention of sexual assault of a child, mention of a mass shooting. With that, I want to give disclaimer number 2. I want to say right at the top of this episode that out of respect to Matt and his family, our formatting for this episode will be a little bit different than usual. You probably noticed that from our intro. This particular case doesn't fall into our typical repertoire, but Bree and I both felt it was an extremely important story to tell, especially during Pride Month. However, because of how truly tragic this case was and is, we didn't feel it would be respectful to format the episode the way we normally do. I also would like to reiterate here that this is an extremely graphic and brutal case. If you're not in the headspace to listen to this, please skip this episode. We don't want anyone getting into a horrible mind space. All right. So do you know much about this case?
I know I've heard of this case, I think, on other podcasts. So I have a general gist of it, but I also kind of a little behind the scenes thing here. I very much avoid true crime.
Yeah.
And I think if it wasn't for this being Pride Month and the importance of this, we would not cover this.
Yeah. No, this is not typically one that's... I feel like when we do cover true crime cases on this podcast, it's a very specific flavor of true crime.
Yes. It's almost not saying that murder is quirky.
No.
But when we cover true crime, we cover ones that are much either have a paranormal tie-in or just tend to be a little bit more quirky.
There's a certain aspect to the case that makes it extremely strange.
Yes.
Like, I'll go back to Chowchilla, like burying a school bus. Like, that's just, and like everything that went into that crime was weird.
It was like, that was like the henchman on the 101 Dalmatians.
Correct. Yes.
So I know a little bit. I don't listen to as much graphic true crime. I used to years ago. I won't say what I do, but professionally, I hear a lot of very heavy things. Yeah. And so I try to stick to ghosts and that kind of, to not deal with all of the heavy stuff in my day-to-day life. I watch Supernatural instead.
Yes. Appropriate.
But go ahead, take it away.
All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about who Matthew Shepard was. Matt, as he was known by his friends and family, was born on December 1st, 1976. He lived in Casper, Wyoming with his mother, Judy, his father, Dennis, and his younger brother, Logan. His family was incredibly loving. They all seemed extremely close to each other, and Matt followed this path as he grew up. It was very clear from a young age that Matt just loved people. He started actually writing poems that he would leave in his neighbors' mailboxes, and this was when he was a young child. And he actually found out from his grandfather that it wasn't technically legal to leave things in people's mailboxes without having a stamp on it. So this inspired him to leave pretty rocks for his neighbors to find instead. He would find these like little trinkets and leave them. And one of the major things I used as a reference for this episode, we'll talk about this a little later, is the documentary Matt Shepard is a Friend of Mine. And from that documentary, it sounds like everyone in the neighborhood was just used to Matt, leaving these little trinkets for them. And he was just a very, very sweet kid. Something else started to become pretty clear about Matt when he was still very young, or at least it became suspicious to his mom, Judy, and that was she suspected that Matt was gay. And this was when he was as young as 8 years old. And she described this suspicion because his favorite Halloween costume was Dolly Parton, and he wore this costume constantly.
I love that.
I know. It's so sweet. And this suspicion did not cause her to treat Matthew any differently. She still loved him completely and unconditionally. It didn't change anything at all. As Matt entered his older years, he continued to be described by those around him as a genuinely kind and just a wonderful person. One of his friends, Nikki Pearson, described Matt as always being able to find and bring out the special thing about a person. He was voted friendliest in his class, and he told Nikki at one point he was very interested in politics, and he stated he wanted to be a diplomat, to change things, and to make a difference.
That sounds so nice.
I know. He's very just passionate kid. So the Shepard family moved to Saudi Arabia in 1993 when Dennis received a job opportunity at the oil company he worked for. Matt was in 10th grade at this time. His parents decided to take this opportunity to move overseas, essentially to help broaden their children's horizons. They wanted them to be able to experience other cultures and other places, and which I thought was really, really cool. But there was a pretty specific challenge to this move. In Saudi Arabia, there were no American high schools for Matt to attend after 9th grade. So while the family moved to Saudi Arabia, Matt kind of had to move again to go to boarding school somewhere else, and this was to be able to continue his education. He chose to attend the American school in Switzerland. At this school, he met many new friends that he became extremely, extremely close with. While in boarding school, Matt also had the opportunity to travel to many different places with his friends, and he took that opportunity with both hands. He went to Rome, Japan, and Morocco. Unfortunately, this was where we have our first trigger warning. Trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning. Unfortunately, this trip to Morocco ended up being extremely traumatic. One night, Matt was attacked while walking back to his hotel, and he was robbed and brutally sexually assaulted by a group of men. And naturally, this affected Matt extremely deeply. Before this, Matt had participated in theater. He really enjoyed theater. He actually wanted to be an actor, and he stopped doing theater. He really didn't like being in large crowds, and he kind of like almost walked with a hunch. He didn't want people to look at him. He didn't want to look at people. It was just a big change, which, yeah, that's a horrible thing to go through.
But those symptoms are really, I'm not diagnosing.
No.
Those symptoms are really, really common symptoms of like PTSD, of the idea of being in crowds becomes awful.
Yeah. So after this occurrence and at the beginning of Matt's college years, he seemed to enter a period of unsettlement in his life, which, yeah, makes sense. He started his college career at Catawba College in North Carolina. And starting college is a big step in anyone's life, but Matt took another big step at this time by officially coming out to his mom.
Like, was it like she wasn't surprised? So it wasn't like,
no. What are you talking about? No, very much not.
It was like, yeah, we knew.
Yeah, pretty much. So he was a freshman in college at this time, and mom was not surprised. She kind of already knew, as we said, and of course, she was extremely supportive of him. As I said, did not change anything. She loved him absolutely unconditionally, no question. And at first, he didn't want his mom to tell his dad because he wanted to tell Dennis himself. His mother did end up telling Dennis about Matt. She did not do this as an act of betrayal. She wasn't trying to hurt him. She did not want Dennis to say anything in the moment out of surprise that could have caused him some kind of harm. So when Matt officially came out to his dad, he told his father that he had something very important to tell him. And in response to Matt telling him this news, Dennis replied, "Okay, so what was that important thing you wanted to tell me?" He was just as supportive as Judy. They, as I said, loved him unconditionally. It didn't change a thing. As stated above, this was the start of a very unsettled period in Matt's life. Based on the documentary at this time, it seemed he was trying to find his place in the world, and as well as handling the trauma of the attack he had undergone, he was dealing with a lot of change, and he was kind of grappling with openly coming out as gay. Up to this point, I don't know exactly what was going on in his mind, but that's a big step for anyone to take. After a while, Matt actually ended up leaving school. He left North Carolina and he moved west to Denver, Colorado. He stayed there for a year. At this point, Matt was dealing with some pretty serious depression. He was still trying to reconcile being a gay man, and in an effort to find some guidance and potentially some form of solace, he attended a church across the street from where he lived. He went to speak with someone there. I shouldn't say he attended a church. I don't know that he was regularly going to services, but he went there to be able to speak with someone. Mm-hmm. And, unfortunately, this was not a great experience. He spoke with a woman that just blatantly, I'm just going to say it bluntly, she was extremely nasty to him. Essentially, she told him that gay people were bad and went to hell.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Naturally, this did not help Matt at all. Just caused him to struggle even more.
No. Oh, that's we won't get onto that soapbox today, but
yeah.
Oh, okay. Keep going.
Sorry. I'm going to introduce another person here that was extremely close to Matt. This is Walt Bolden. He was actually Matt's guidance counselor, I believe I'm not sure when he became Matt's guidance counselor, if this was middle school or if this was his first years of high school, but the two became very, very close, and they stayed close. Walt more or less convinced Matt to move back to Wyoming to kind of get out of the situation he was in, to get back to people he was closer to, and he convinced him to apply to the University of Wyoming in Laramie. When he restarted his student career in Laramie, Matt's life seemed to take a bit of an upturn. He became involved with the LGBTQ group on campus and even helped to foster a mentor program for students in the queer community who were new to the campus. The purpose of this was to help them get used to college life and to offer support. In the documentary, they talked about this could be questions about being queer. It could just be questions about the campus. It basically just offered support to people who, especially at this time, were seen as very different than other people. He was making new friends, and other friends, including Walt, noticed that he was doing better. And then we hit October 6th, 1998. On this date, Matt attended a meeting with the LGBTQ group on campus. Oh, I'm sorry. At that point, it was just called the LGBT group on campus. And he decided to go out for a drink afterwards. He was seen entering the Fireside Lounge and bar by himself by the bartender, another Matt. This is Matt Galloway. Just to keep this from being confusing, I'm going to refer to the bartender by his last name. According to Galloway, Matt had been in by himself before, so this was not necessarily strange for him to go out by alone. The same night, 2 other men walked into this bar, Russell Henderson and Aaron McKinney, and they encountered Matt. This was sadly the beginning of the absolute heinous crime that would lead to Matt's death. Henderson and McKinney later stated that when they entered the bar, they noticed Matt and assumed he was gay. They plotted in the bar's restroom to pretend that they were gay to get Matt comfortable with them, and then they decided they were going to rob him. Later, Galloway, the bartender, saw all 3 of these young men leave together. Henderson and McKinney left the bar with Matt in McKinney's truck. This was actually his father's truck, they found out later. While Henderson drove, McKinney in the passenger seat suddenly looked at Matt and stated something along the lines of, "We're not gay and you're going to get jacked." McKinney then began to beat Matt and demanded his wallet, which Matt gave to him without hesitation. Despite his easy compliance, McKinney continued his assault. Henderson proceeded to drive them out into the prairie before stopping. The 2 men forced Matt out of the pickup and tied him to a fence. Trigger warning, guys. This is discussion of brutality and injury description. It is bad.
I also imagine you will be able to look at the chapter titles on Spotify and Apple and probably skip past this if you need to.
Yes. But I do want to just be extremely clear. This is bad. This is not nice. With Matt completely helpless, McKinney proceeded to ruthlessly beat him with the end of a .357 Magnum pistol. I believe the final data stated it was between 18 and 21 times that Matt was beaten around the head and face. He sustained 4 skull fractures in this attack, the final of which was behind his right ear. This crushed into his brainstem and actually, I believe, tore his ear off. I don't know if it completely tore it off, but it tore it. It was awful. After this brutal attack, Henderson and McKinney left Matt tied to the fence in the freezing weather. Again, this is October in Wyoming. It was frigid outside. They drove away with his identity, his shoes, and his wallet that contained $20. Matt would be left there stranded and alone for 18 hours. The next day, as the sun was setting, Matt was finally found. A different Aaron Kreifels, I believe is how that's pronounced. Kreifels, if I pronounce that wrong, I apologize, was riding past on his dirt bike when he took a bit of a fall and he spotted something tied to the fence.
So if he wouldn't have fallen, he wouldn't have noticed him?
I don't know. I don't know if it was that he fell and looked up and saw it, or if he was riding past, saw it, and fell.
Oh, okay.
Aaron originally thought what was tied to the fence was a scarecrow because it was close to Halloween. But on closer inspection, he was absolutely horrified to find Matt horrifically injured, but somehow still alive. Aaron was able to run to a nearby residence and contact authorities to come to Matt's aid. Enter Deputy Reggie, I believe it's pronounced Fluty, F-L-U-T-Y. She responded to dispatch's call about someone who, quote unquote, had been beat up.
Man, they didn't give her enough warning.
They did not. She stated later she did not recognize the severity of the situation right away until she got there.
Oh my goodness.
She came upon Matt tied to the fence with his hands behind him, lying prone on his back. He was covered in blood. The only spot that was clean, and this is kind of a trigger warning in and of itself, the only spot that was relatively clean on his face were 2 tracks where tears had cleaned his cheeks. Originally, she thought Matt was a 12-year-old boy due to how small he was, because Matt was a very just naturally small, slight guy. He was around 5'2", and he weighed just over 100 pounds. So when she saw the severity of the situation, she's sitting there desperately trying to keep Matt alive before he was rushed to Ivinson Memorial Hospital in Laramie. And during the time that she was waiting for the ambulance, Flutie did what she could to try and soothe Matt and just make him know that he wasn't alone. She kept telling him, like, I'm here for you. Don't give up. Like, you can get through this. Matt's injuries were found to be too grave to be treated at the Laramie Hospital, so he was transported to, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Powder, maybe? It's Poudre, or Poudre? Poudre, maybe? Valley Hospital in Fort Collins, Colorado. And when he got there, the staff began desperate measures to treat Matt and keep him alive. But they also had the awful task of alerting Matt's parents to the fact that their son was barely clinging to life. And his parents were still in Saudi Arabia. They received the call at 5 a.m. their time. And at this point, the hospital couldn't even really tell Matt's parents what had happened for certain. All they knew was his name and that he was extremely injured. His parents actually found out from Matt's aunt, his mother's sister, that his injuries had been caused by a brutal beating rather than the car accident they assumed their son had been in. So Dennis, Judy, and Logan flew back to Wyoming from Saudi Arabia, where they met with the doctor in the hospital, who then had to explain to this poor family that Matt was still alive, but it was unknown how long he would survive. When Matt's family was able to finally visit him, Matt was comatose, and Judy stated that when she first saw Matt, he was so swollen and beat up that she could not even tell it was him until she got closer, and then she saw little things that marked him, like his braces, like his dental braces, and some small like marks on his face that she was like, that's him. The family tried to be as positive as they could while visiting Matt. This was, of course, extremely difficult. And the hospital, meanwhile, did their best to shield the family from the heavy media coverage that was occurring at this point, so they could just take the time to be with their son and their brother. And I do want to take a brief interlude here to say that at this point, Matt's story was being spread far and wide by the media, and McKinney and Henderson were both suspects in his murder. However, for now, I do want to focus on Matt's story. We'll kind of rewind and come back to the rest of this later. At this point, Matt was still being kept alive through medical intervention, and the family was faced with the absolutely horrific choice of having to remove him from life support. And aside from the fact that this was their child and their sibling, they also had to contend with the concern that if they removed Matt from life support, if it would affect his criminal case.
Oh, that's such a
something you should never have to think about. Like, it's hard. Like, you should never have to think about taking anyone off life support. That's terrible enough, but
Roxy's like, I need to comfort everyone here.
She's like, she's being a great emotional support dog.
She actually is a very good, she is not a registered emotional support animal, but I think she really could be.
She does a really good job. Dennis ended up taking the drive from the hospital in Laramie 4 hours away to Casper, where the family home was, so he could try to bring some of Matt's childhood effects to him. Mm-hmm. And this was just in an attempt to like give him some kind of comfort. Mm-hmm. The family did eventually come to the conclusion that they believed it would be best to take Matt off life support, but they couldn't do it. They just couldn't bring themselves to like tell the doctors to stop it. So at this point, Judy spoke with Matt's guidance counselor, Walt, who had been informed of the situation, and she asked him to please go in the room with Matt and talk to him, to ask him to stop fighting because she wasn't able to do it.
What an ask.
Like, yeah.
Like, I can't imagine, like, how much it took for her to even ask him that and how much, like, just whatever the word is that Walt had to be able to do that. Yeah. Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like I'm just, like, I'm thoroughly impressed by both of them.
Correct. So, Walt went in the room. He sat down with Matt and began to talk to him. He told him it was going to be okay. There was going to be good that came out of this tragic situation. And he said, you can't put your parents through this decision to remove you from the life support. He then said his final goodbyes and left the room. And I want to add something here that just hit me. And this was in the documentary. Walt was interviewed for this documentary, and he said this. The day of Matt's attack was Walt's birthday. He and Matt had plans to celebrate that evening, but Matt called at the last minute to cancel. So Matthew Shepard passed away at 12:53 a.m. on October 12th, 1998, surrounded by his family, and he was 21 years old. We're going to rewind a little bit and go back to the day that Matt was found. When he was found, the story of his attack began to spread through the newspapers. And while the original motive for the crime was robbery, like a robbery gone wrong, LGBTQ activists began to stand up and protest that the motive was actually based in a hate crime against the queer community. And Walt was one of the people to really loudly speak up about this, spreading the news to various news outlets to make sure it was not just glossed over or made out to be quote unquote just a mugging. And in the documentary, he is quoted as saying, "A beating this severe didn't occur over $20.
I was just going to say that, like, there is so much venom in the attack that, like, it's not just, like, I just going to randomly beat this person up for their money.
Oh, yeah. And he, Matt gave them a little bit of a spoiler alert here, if you can call it that. Matt gave up the wallet without, like, he was, "Give me your wallet." He gave it up. He did not fight.
That's not a spoiler. You said it already.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true.
Not that it matters.
Yeah. But it's like you then continued after that. If you were just trying to rob this kid, you would have either just shoved him out of the truck and drove away. That's, yeah.
Hate crime is a fitting term because you, like, the amount of just horribleness, you don't just randomly do that.
No, absolutely not. Partially due to Walt and other of Matt's friends spreading the word, the news began to spread like wildfire, and by the time Dennis, Judy, and Logan Shepard reached American soil, they were startled to find that Matt's story was being covered by national news outlets. A large crowd of people had established in front of the hospital where Matt was being treated, including those with the media, as well as just those people wanting to send well wishes to Matt and his family. And even the current then president, Bill Clinton, had personally sent well wishes to Matt's family.
That's so thoughtful.
Yeah. After Matt passed, a funeral service was held for him in Casper on October 16th, 1998. The service was attended by many who loved him, and unfortunately, the service was not peaceful and free of contention as it should have been. Protesters against the LGBTQ people, including the Westboro Baptist Church, showed up at the funeral spewing hatred and vitriol.
Okay, I'm going to not go on too much of a soapbox.
Go for it.
Like, you're showing up to a funeral, like, regardless of if you disagree wrongly with a person and their orientation, nothing gives you the right to protest a funeral like that.
No.
And it wasn't like from someone who was like an innocent person who was beat to death.
Correct.
And the whole gist, okay, we might get some hate for this. The whole gist of Christianity, Jesus literally said, "Love your neighbors," was one of the two main new commandments. But like most of his work was helping the poor, helping the downtrodden, loving everyone. He said zero about being gay. And you're going to call yourself a follower of Jesus and then do something so fucking ridiculous. Keep going.
I do want to give a quick heads up. If anyone, I as always, we're going to link all resources at the end of the show notes. If anyone wants to look into these articles, I will warn you ahead of time. There are pictures of the leader of the Westboro Baptist Church. I don't even want to say his name, frankly. And the followers at this funeral with their signs. It's awful to look at. I just want to give everyone a heads up because if, by all means, look at the articles, encourage it. I think education in this topic is extremely, extremely, extremely important. But it's extremely upsetting. Like, trying to do the research for this was really hard. So counter-protesters showed up as well to try and protect the family from this hatred, which is great, but it still is just chaos at a funeral. That's Logan, Matt's younger brother, who was in 12th grade at this time, was so upset not only by his brother's death, but the attention, both good and bad, brought on the family that he didn't even want people to know his real name. The church itself, where this funeral was held, was surrounded by SWAT teams and police snipers and had to be cleared by bomb-sniffing dogs, presumably before the service. And at this point, Dennis was asked to do a press conference the day of the funeral. He had to wear a bulletproof vest for his own protection. And Judy was just, of course, overcome at this press conference. She just felt like the only reason the press was even there was to just ogle at this grieving family.
That's such a, they're grieving their child and then they're dealing with this.
Yeah. And it's such a double-edged sword there, because it's like, I can understand why, especially like Walt and his friends wanted the news out there, because I think especially during this time, it would have been easy to kind of brush this kind of thing under the rug. No one wanted to talk about gay people. No one wanted to talk about the fact that this was completely senseless. And, so I get the importance of it, but at the same time, it's like, it's just awful. Well, it's just awful.
Like, is it the right time to?
Yes. I'm going to rewind again here, once again, to the day that Matt was found. Well, actually, we're going to rewind to just after this brutal attack. So I already stated McKinney and Henderson drove away and left Matt to die, tied to this fence in the middle of the prairie.
How did they think that they weren't going to get caught?
We talk about that a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's okay. However, they were quickly rounded up as suspects in this case. And in case it wasn't already clear, they were both caught. I'm just going to tell everyone right up front, they were both caught. And I'm going to spoil it and say they're both currently sitting in jail. The two drove back to Laramie and almost instantly got into a fight with two other young men. Like a street fight. During this fight, both Henderson and McKinney received head wounds. And McKinney actually struck one of the other men in the face with the same pistol he had used to strike Matt.
Were they on something?
Well, I didn't get into that as much. Apparently, I believe they were drug users. I don't know if they were intoxicated. I mean, they had drunk. They were at the bar, but I don't know if they were on any other intoxicating substances at that time. But there was discussion about how they were heavy drug users. I didn't go into it as much in this as I probably should have. Police officer Flint Waters happened to be in the same neighborhood where this fight took place for an unrelated incident, and happened to see Henderson and McKinney getting back into McKinney's pickup after the fight. When he tried to flag the two of them down, they both tried to run. McKinney was successful in fleeing the area. Waters was successful in catching Henderson. I do want to note, according to the copy of the court document I read for this section of my research, Henderson was Mirandized before speaking with Officer Waters.
Okay.
And I also want to note here, I actually found direct online copies of police interviews, court documents. So this is directly from this case. Mm-hmm. Officer Waters questioned Henderson and looked around the pickup, and he actually spotted the bloody pistol in the truck bed. Henderson was then sent by ambulance to Ivinson Hospital to have his head wounds treated. Ivinson Hospital, where they sent Matt first.
Sure.
At this point, the truck was considered a crime scene and turned over to Sergeant Mitch Cushman along with Detective Jeffrey Burry. Cushman proceeded to document the evidence at the crime scene, including the bloody pistol and a bloody coat in the truck bed, a pistol case lying on the ground, blood spattered inside of the car, and most damning, Matt's credit card and a shoe on the passenger seat. The shoe would turn out to belong to Matt because these two also took his shoes. The problem was, at this point, there was no way to know how serious finding that credit card on the truck's dashboard was, because at this point, it would be hours until Matt was found. So they did not connect. They knew something fishy was going on here, but I don't think, realized just how severe this situation was. However, they did continue to investigate the fight that had broken out, as well as the suspicious evidence found on/in the truck. And in doing so, they were able to figure out that McKinney was the second person who Officer Waters had not been able to catch. While the two of them were not arrested at this time, their names were still very much in the forefront of the police officers' minds. Meanwhile, Henderson and McKinney proceeded to meet with their significant others, Kristen Price and Chastity. I'm not sure if this is pronounced Pasley or Paisley. It's pronounced Pasley. Later, it was reported that that McKinney told his girlfriend, trigger warning, I'm not going to say this word because I'm not going to. I think I might have killed an F.A. Not going to finish that word. Price and Pasley ended up helping their significant others to come up with alibis. And Price would later take her boyfriend, McKinney, to Ivinson Hospital to have his head wounds from the street fight treated.
Is that the only hospital in the area?
I believe that is the hospital in Laramie, yes.
Okay, so that would make sense why everyone is showing up there.
Right. But it's just like, damn. So we're going to fast forward now to when Matt was found. After Matt was rushed away by ambulance, Deputy Flutie, along with several other police officers, began documenting the scene where he was found. They found tire tracks, a mark in the dirt bank nearby that indicated a vehicle might have backed into it. They found a watch and Matt's University of Wyoming ID card. The connection between the scene where Matt was found and the Henderson and McKinney issue was later discovered by Detective Burry, that detective that was checking out the pickup truck. He heard about Matt's discovery over the police radio, and when he heard Matt's name, he remembered seeing that credit card on the dashboard of McKinney's truck, and he presumably went, oh shit. They also discovered that Matt had been found without shoes on and remembered the leather shoe he had seen on the pickup's passenger seat. Robert Debris, the sergeant of investigations at Albany County Sheriff's Office, was told about Matt being found. Based on the court document I used for this section of my research, I'm also presuming he was told about the connection to McKinney and Henderson at this time. That was not blatantly stated, but kind of presumably at this point. Sergeant Debris quickly made his way to the hospital where he thought Matthew was. This was Ivinson, but at this point, Matt had already been transferred to the hospital in Colorado. However, Robert Debris managed to find someone else he was able to speak with, McKinney himself, because Price had taken him to the hospital for his head wounds. Again, I want to emphasize, according to the copy of the document I read for this section of my research, McKinney was Mirandized before speaking with Sergeant Debris. This was all legal.
Mm-hmm. So, in case our listeners don't know what the Miranda lights are.
Oh, yes.
Hold on. Miranda rights are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole, you have the right to not say anything. You have the right to an attorney, or one will be appointed to you. Yeah. Is that correct?
Yes.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law.
Correct. Yep. So, and that is that's a big deal, because if an officer were to start questioning someone without Mirandizing them, they can potentially
be thrown out.
Yep. That person could confess to killing 100 people in the space of 2 hours. They weren't Mirandized, so it could be thrown out of court.
Mm. So, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So they were told all these things, and they're like, I'm still going to talk.
Well.
Fess up, but continue.
Yeah.
Continue.
The first question out of McKinney's mouth on seeing this sergeant was whether he had caught the person who had beaten McKinney up. Sergeant Debris answered with a question of his own, proceeding to ask McKinney where he'd been all night. The story McKinney told was that he and Henderson had indeed gone to a bar, so that part of the story was true. But then he stated that some random third person had taken the truck keys from where McKinney had laid them on the car. This person left for a while, came back, picked up McKinney and Henderson, and then drove them to the neighborhood where they had all gotten into this fist fight. Makes a whole lot of sense. After speaking with Sergeant Debris, McKinney was eventually transferred to, how did we pronounce that? Poudre,
I think.
Poudre Valley Hospital, the same hospital where Matt was currently fighting for his life.
I don't know so ethically how that works, because if it is the only trauma hospital, that is where they're going to take the person.
Yeah, absolutely. And at this point, they don't know for certain, but it's that weird, just fate is just uncomfortable sometimes. Yeah. In the end, it was Kristen Price that ultimately caved and told police that McKinney and Henderson had committed the awful crime against Matthew. And I'm going to read a quote directly from the court document here. Her statement corroborated the physical evidence in many respects and led to the recovery of additional physical evidence, such as Shepard's wallet, which was hidden in the garbage can in the home she shared with McKinney.
My goodness.
So, you had asked earlier, how did they think they were going to get away with this? I really think that they thought they were going to just take all of Matt's stuff and leave him essentially for dead in the middle of a prairie and get rid of everything that could tie them to that crime. Because there was also discussion of how McKinney was like trying to sell this gun that he was using. So they were just going to get rid of all the evidence and no one could tie him back to it.
How old were they?
They were around the same age as Matt.
Okay.
I believe one of them was 21, the other was 22. Don't quote me for gospel on that, but they were all similar age.
I just read your next line.
Yep. This led to the arrest of McKinney, who would later give a confession of the crime to Sergeant Debris and the second interviewer, Detective Ben Fritzen. The confession that McKinney gave to police was riddled with anti-gay language and slurs. I read a copy of the confession. It is linked in the show notes. It is not nice. It made me extremely angry. So if you want to look through this, read at your own risk. According to McKinney's statement, it didn't bother him that Matt was queer. He just figured he and Henderson would give him a ride home because he was drunk. He then claimed that Matt began grabbing at his leg and grabbing at his genitals, and that was the trigger that caused him to begin beating Matt brutally. He also claimed during the interview that while he was in process of beating Matt, Matt was trying to be, quote, all over him and, quote, throwing himself at him. When Sergeant Debris asked if he thought Matt was maybe just trying to get away from him by throwing himself at the two, this is a direct quote from the interview transcript, quote, I don't know if he was trying to get away or what he was doing, but I just remember getting so mad. McKinney also proceeded to say how he would never do something like this. He didn't know what had gotten into him, and mourning that it would be a long time until he could see his son again, because, plot twist, McKinney had a young son. To be clear, I'm not sure if this child was with his current fiance, Price, or an ex-wife. I got the distinction from reading the transcript of his police confession that he may have been married previously. I don't know this for certain, so do not quote me. But he did have a child.
So he like brutally murdered someone and it's like, but I don't get to see my kid, which I'm sure was very sad for him, but like...
That Dennis and Judy and Logan aren't going to be able to see their son or their brother ever again either.
And also, like, if you don't know what happened to you and lost control that badly...
Probably shouldn't be around a kid.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, anyways.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to the trial portion of this episode. And I kind of want to give a little bit of a disclaimer / content warning. In this section, I'm going to be using very judicial and impartial terminology. This is the way that the law has to look at criminal cases, and for the purposes of telling the story in order to describe the court proceedings and reasoning by the judge and both defense and prosecution teams. I'm going to kind of have to use similar language. I don't mean this to sound unfeeling or cold. It's just how the law has to handle these kind of cases. Henderson was first to trial in April of 1999. He ended up taking a plea deal before the trial that would cause him to spend the rest of his life in prison. Specifically, he would face 2 consecutive life sentences for kidnap and felony murder. But in taking this plea deal, it would take the death sentence off the table. Another thing to note, the Westboro Baptist Church showed up again at Henderson's trial. But this time, they had more than just counter-protesters to contend with. Jim Osborne, a friend of Matt's and the chair at the University of Wyoming LGBT Association, showed up with the group that would come to be known as Angel Action. The group wore large costumes that replicated angel wings made from white sheets, PVC pipe, and duct tape. And in standing in front of the members of the Westboro Baptist Church, the wings blocked out the signs and the hateful slogans. Which, it's incredible. The pictures of that are really, really cool. Good on them. McKinney's trial was a different story. His trial proceeded a year after Matt's murder, and McKinney initially tried to mount a defense. First, they tried to have evidence found in the pickup truck as well as McKinney's statement given at the hospital and at the police station suppressed. The defense essentially tried to say that the head injury McKinney had sustained during the fight he and Henderson got into after leaving Matt on the prairie would have affected his cognition enough that he would not have really understood that in speaking to police, he was giving up his rights that he was Mirandized with. So one of those rights, like the Miranda rights, is you have the right to remain silent. If you speak, you're legally giving up that right. They also tried to claim that the seizure of McKinney's truck and the evidence inside was not legal, as they did not have a warrant for these items. And they also tried to say that the warrant that was used to search McKinney and the home of McKinney and Price was brought about by the illegal seizure of the truck and the evidence inside. So the evidence found through the warrant should be suppressed as well.
So he was trying to get everything dismissed by a technicality, basically.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
However, the judge presiding over the case, Judge Barton R. Voigt, I believe it's pronounced Voigt, it's Voigt, shot both of these arguments down. He stated that, according to evidence presented, McKinney knew that what he was doing when he waived his Miranda right to remain silent. The head wound was serious, but it did not impair him to the point that he didn't know what he was doing. And I just want to say, this head wound, I've kind of just kept referencing that way. He got hit in the head with a bat, which I just find ironic. Judge Voigt also stated that when the pistol case and the bloody coat were seized, so that was initially right after that street fight, officers had probable cause to believe a crime had been committed. Same deal with the pickup truck. Therefore, the seizure of that evidence was legal. After this attempt at a defense failed, McKinney's defense team would then attempt to mount a different defense that would become known as the gay panic defense. And yes, you heard that right. According to the LGBTQ plus BAR's website, quote, the LGBTQ plus, quote, panic defense is a legal strategy wherein defendants charged with violent crimes weaponize their victims' real or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity / expression to reduce or evade criminal liability.
We're taking a pause from these very heavy proceedings to show off my dog's emotional support abilities.
Yes.
She can tell when each of us are getting
steamed up.
Yeah, because she came over when I was getting a little dysregulated, and now
she's coming over to me. You're doing very good job, Roxy. Thank
she's
you.
Like, I need two of me.
She's my kingdom for an intelligent octopus. Essentially, a defendant states that they committed a violent crime upon the realization that their victim was queer in an attempt to get a lesser sentence or get out of a sentence altogether. In a court document, Judge Voigt described what he called, quote, homosexual panic as, quote, the idea that a latent homosexual and manifest, quote, homophobe can be so upset by a homosexual's advance to him that he becomes temporarily insane, in which state he may kill the homosexual.
Wasn't there a point in time where you could use the temporary insanity defense if you caught your spouse cheating and killed the affair partner?
I don't know for certain, but it would not shock me. And also, guys, some of this language is extremely outdated. These are direct quotes. This is not how necessarily the best way to speak today, but this is just language that was used in the case. During McKinney's case, the defense stated that McKinney reacted violently and suddenly in a heat of passion to purported sexual advances by Matthew. They were attempting to reduce McKinney's sentence to manslaughter rather than murder. Trigger warning. This is where the trigger warning of discussion of, more mention of sexual abuse of a child comes in. In doing so, they brought forward evidence that McKinney had been sexually abused as a young kid. Their term for this was homosexual abuse. So I'm not sure if that meant he had been abused by I'm assuming that means he had been abused by
a man.
A man. They also stated that McKinney had, quote, homosexual experiences as a teenager. And once again, I'm not 100% sure what they were trying to get at here, if they were stating McKinney had experimented with his sexuality as a teenager, or if he was sexually assaulted as a teenager. So we're moving past that now. In this defense, This defense, thankfully, did not hold up in court. In the same document I mentioned above, Judge Voigt concluded that the, quote, gay panic defense McKinney's team was trying to mount was inadmissible in court, and the sentence would not be reduced to manslaughter. Thank God. On November 4th, 1999, McKinney was found guilty of kidnapping and the felony murder of Matt Shepard. In a surprising twist of events, Judy and Dennis Shepard reached out to have the death sentence removed from the table.
I don't think I realized that family can do that. I guess it makes sense, though.
Yeah. They pushed to have that taken away. According to Matt Shepard is a friend of mine, the documentary, Judy Shepard wanted to begin the healing process and found that this was the place to start. During the victim impact statement, Dennis stated to McKinney, quote, "I would like nothing better than to see you die, Mr. McKinney. However, this is the time to begin the healing process, to show mercy to someone who refused to show any mercy, to use this as my first step in my own closure about losing Matt." Instead of the death penalty, McKinney entered into an agreement that he would be given 2 consecutive life sentences in prison. As part of this agreement, McKinney agreed that he would never speak to any news or media organizations about this case. He would, unfortunately, violate this clause many times.
For some reason, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Nope. I want to wrap up here a little bit with Matt's legacy. And his legacy began, sadly, pretty much as soon as he passed, or before. Matt's story began to change people's minds and hearts nearly instantaneously. Dave O'Malley, the sheriff at the time of Matt's murder, admitted in the BBC article that I used that he was, quote, pretty homophobic until he started investigating Matt's case. When he started investigating, though, interactions with Matt's friends, many of whom were not straight, started to change his understanding of who queer people were and his attitudes towards them.
Also, like, the amount of, like, the fact that he up and said that.
Yeah.
Of, like, hey, I used to be very homophobic, and this made me realize that I was wrong.
Like, I didn't include the full quote from him. It's in the BBC article. Again, that's going to be linked in the show notes, but it's very powerful. It was very powerful to read that. Dennis, Judy, and Logan have worked hard to preserve the legacy of their son and brother. Just literally days after his death, Dennis and Judy formed the Matthew Shepard Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting LGBTQ+ people, educating others about the LGBTQ+ community, and preventing hate crimes. Their mission statement from their website, quote, "We amplify the story of Matthew Shepard to inspire individuals, organizations, and communities to embrace the dignity and equality of all people." They engage in public talks, provide hate crime prevention training to law enforcement officers and prosecutors. Multiple artworks have come about surrounding Matt's death, including books, movies, and plays. The Laramie Project is a play created by the Tectonic Theater Project out of New York City. The theater company traveled to Laramie as well and interviewed the townsfolk there about the impacts the hate crime had on them and on the town. And then these interviews were turned into this play, which remains one of the most frequently performed plays in America. Matt Shepard is a Friend of Mine is a documentary created by Matt's friend, Michelle Juice. Or I believe it's pronounced Jose, excuse me. This followed Matt's life through interviews with his friends, teachers, and family. And Judy Shepard also wrote a book called The Meaning of Matthew, My Son's Murder in Laramie and a World Transformed. Several musicians wrote pieces of music based on this horrific hate crime. And the Angel Action has also continued forward. The Angel Action took place once more in Florida. This is where the mention of mass shooting trigger warning comes in. The Angel Action took place once more in Florida as a counteraction against the Westboro Baptist Church protesters at funerals from those who had died in the Pulse nightclub mass shooting. In 2009, with help from the Matthew Shepard Foundation, then President Barack Obama signed the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act into signed law. Matt was interred at the Washington National Cathedral on October 26, 2018.
That's like 9 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until that point, Judy and Dennis had kept Matt's ashes at home. They were concerned his memorial would be vandalized if they had him buried somewhere.
I can understand that concern.
Yeah. In the BBC article I referenced, a quote from Judy says, "This is a huge relief to us to know that he'll be safe and protected forever." I'm going to close out here with another quote from Dennis's victim impact statement that was read in the court the day of McKinney's sentencing. Matt officially, quote from Dennis Shepard. Matt officially died at 12:53 a.m. on Monday, October 12th, 1998, in the hospital in Fort Collins, Colorado. He actually died on the outskirts of Laramie, tied to a fence that Wednesday before when you beat him. You, Mr. McKinney, with your friend, Mr. Henderson, killed my son. By the end of the beating, his body was just trying to survive. You left him out there by himself, but he wasn't alone.
There were his lifelong friends with him, friends that he had grown up with. You're probably wondering who these friends were. First, he had the beautiful night sky with the same stars and moons that we used to look at through a telescope. Then he had the daylight and the sun to shine on him one more time. One more cool, wonderful autumn day in Wyoming. His last day of life in Wyoming. His last day of life in this state he always proudly called home. And through it all, he was breathing in for the last time the smell of Wyoming, sagebrush, and the scent of pine trees from the snowy range. He heard the wind and the ever-present Wyoming wind for the last time. He had one more friend with him. When he grew to know him through his time in Sunday school and as an acolyte at St. Mark's in Casper, as well as through his visit at St. Matthew's in Laramie, he had God. I feel better knowing he wasn't alone.
Thank you for that. I'm so sorry I had to pass that off.
It's okay. We got through it. Did they express any remorse?
I think Henderson did, and McKinney did apologize to the family.
Apologize or like?
He stated there wouldn't be a day go by that he wasn't, I believe his words were, ashamed for his actions. I don't know. I just don't know.
Not that it makes it better, but like,
no.
Was there some kind? And it seems like Matthew Shepard's parents were very, very good people.
Oh, yeah. They just seem like amazing human beings.
Because they had every right. I mean, there's strong emotions in that.
Yeah.
But they had every right to be nasty.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't sound like they were.
No. If you are interested in reading it, Dennis Shepard's full victim impact statement is available to read. That is part of the court document that I used in my research. It is, again, linked, but it's pretty long, and he discusses it in pretty strong detail. But this quote in particular was just extremely, extremely touching. I just thought it would be a kind of a nice way to
start wrapping
this up. But I would also, if this is okay with you,
I just glanced at, and I think we're on the same.
Yeah. I'd like to just come out here straight up and make my stance on this very clear. Being queer is not a choice. Whether that means a person is gay, bisexual, trans, asexual, pansexual, or any other identity, it is not a decision a person wakes up and decides to make one day. It is not a lifestyle. It's not a trend. It's not a phase. It is how a person is born. A person can pretend not to be queer. They can present themselves as straight. They can decide to never come out. But that does not mean they are straight, and queer people do not deserve to live a life of fear from other people's reactions to them. They deserve to live peaceful lives, no different than anyone else. And they certainly should never have to worry about horrific, heinous crimes like this happening to them.
I completely agree.
So that is the case.
What drew you to this topic?
I first heard this story on the Morbid podcast, and it broke my heart. I think this is an extremely important story to tell, especially in today's particular climate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you most want people to take away from the story?
There's two things. Before passing judgment on another person, get to know them first. I think so many people have this bias against the queer community, not just the queer community, but so many different communities. But in this case, particularly the queer community. And I think if people would just put that aside just for a minute and actually get to know those in the queer community, so much contention and hatred could be wiped out. I can't say it's ever going to be completely gone, but it starts with one person. I also that the hatred and prejudice is wrong, no matter how different a person is from you, no matter their race, ethnicity, creed, sexuality, gender identity, no matter what, people deserve to be treated with respect. Crimes should not be committed, period, but crimes like this in particular are just so heinous and vile, and they are so preventable.
Really well said.
Thank you.
Yes. So that wraps up this very, very heavy episode. Like Christiana said, if you are feeling up to it, take a look at some of those sources. And I also think that it's an important reminder that, like you said, don't judge. Like, you don't know what people are going through. Don't judge them.
Right.
And also, one small act of kindness can go a really long way.
Yes. It takes one open heart. And sometimes I feel like people, and it's hard not to fall into this mindset. I think we all do it, where it's just like, what can I do? I'm just one person. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah, it definitely.
I just want to say, strangers, we love you. It's time for us to part ways.
Until we meet again, remember to show compassion and kindness for others, no matter what.
We'll be back again soon with another Something Strange.